G'day, Chris here. Today we're going to have a look at how to self-service your inflatable life jacket. Most inflatable life jackets these days will allow you to do a self-service, at least for a couple of years. And so we're going to have a look at that process and what's required. The process we're going to use today is for the Menace Marine brand. Each manufacturer will have their own instructions. They will be very similar, but it is always important to make sure you get the instructions specific to the brand of life jacket that you have. So when you purchased your inflatable life jacket, it should have come with some instructions. So this is an example of a self-service booklet. It has all the instructions required to perform the self-service inspection. So we're going to run through this booklet. Now at the back of the booklet, there is a checklist. But of course, there's only one checklist in this booklet, and you may want to self-service more than once. So if you visit menacemarine.com.au, you can download a printable checklist. So that way you can print off more than one, and also it will be a little bit bigger for you to be able to write in. So we're going to start by doing a visual inspection. We're going to check the valise or the outer cover. We're going to check the straps, and then we'll move inside the jacket. So we want to check the front of the cover to make sure it doesn't have any rips, tears, or any damage of any sort. We want to check the back of it to make sure that the valise is in good condition. The valise has to be able to give way for the life jacket to inflate, so the valise needs to be kept in good condition. We want to check all the straps and the buckles to make sure there's no fraying. We want to make sure the buckles still work, give them a good tug. Make sure it's still got its grab strap attached that cannot be removed. It is part of the requirement of an inflatable life jacket. So we want to check all the other stitching, make sure that everything is in place. So I'm going to check that off on the checklist. And now we're going to move inside the jacket. So we're going to open up the valise. And that will reveal the bladder on the inside. So from this bladder, we're going to be able to get some of the key information from the jacket, such as the serial number. So this has got the serial number printed on this little form here. So we can copy that onto our checklist. Depending on the year of the jacket and which standard it's been approved for, the model number may or may not be on that form. On this jacket, it's over this side. So the model, I'll write that down. And we need to put when it was last serviced or when it was purchased if it hasn't been serviced already. So on the bladder here, we want to check the reflective tape to make sure it's still in place. Reflective tape can delaminate over a few years, so we want to make sure that's in place. We want to check the oral tube to make sure that that is still in good condition. It still has the dust cap. We want to make sure that the whistle is still attached to the life jacket and that the whistle works. If it's got a safety harness installed, then we can check that. This jacket doesn't have it, so we're going to just strike that out. Now we can get access to the gas cylinder, and we're going to remove that. And we're going to check for any rust or corrosion, any pitting, any damage of any sort. So this gas cylinder has been used because I can see a hole in the end of the cylinder. So this is an empty cylinder. It needs to be replaced with a new one. So we'll throw that out immediately. We'll bring back the new one, but we won't install it just yet because we need to do a few other tests before that is reinstalled. So the next step is to inflate the jacket. We've got to leave it for 24 hours inflated. So that will make sure there's no holes in the bladder and that there's no leaks in any of the valves. So to do that, just use the oral tube to blow it up. No point wasting the gas bottle. Use the oral tube to blow it up. So once it's blown up, we want to leave it in a room that's going to stay a nice constant temperature for 24 hours. And we'll come back in 24 hours to make sure that it's still pumped up. So now after 24 hours, you want to make sure that it's still inflated. If it has gone down at all, then it's most likely that there is a hole in the bladder or the valves have gone. So this one is still inflated, so that's passed. Now what I'm going to do is let the bladder down. So we reverse the oral tube cap, press it in there and let it down. You want to make sure that you get all the air out of the bladder. Alrighty, so we've got all the air out of the bladder now. So there's a few other checks we need to do. we're going to get access to the mechanism over here. Now we need to check that the plunger that pierces the CO2 gas cylinder, we need to check that that rises proud of the actuator. So we want to look down the hole and make sure that the pin is coming out. We want to make sure that that pin is still sharp. We don't want it to be flat or broken. We want to make sure that the O-ring is still in place. So this jacket is a manual jacket, so there's no automatic cartridge installed. Either way, we want to unscrew that, and we want to check the plunger on this side to make sure that it does the same thing, that it makes the pin rise proud. So before we put the gas cylinder on, we want to make sure that the cylinder is in good condition. We need to check the engraved weight and compare that with the actual weight of the cylinder. So the ideal kind of scales would be jewellery scales. You want scales that can measure by the gram, preferably by the 1/10 of a gram. So we put this on the scale just to check what the weight is, and we compare it to the engraved weight, and it needs to be within plus or minus 2 grams of the printed weight to be usable. So this one is good, so we can install this back into the actuator. We want to record onto our checklist what the engraved weight was and what the actual weight was. So as part of the testing process on this style of actuator, which is a clipped actuator, we will have broken the green clip when we were testing the firing arm. So that green clip will need to be replaced. You can get them from Menace Marine, we'll send them out to you. That way we've replaced it with a good gas cylinder. This style doesn't have an automatic cartridge, but if it did have an automatic cartridge, then we need to check to make sure the expiry date of the cartridge still has at least 12 months to go. If it hasn't got 12 months, then we need to replace it straight away. So the auto cartridge screws onto the bottom here. The gas cylinder needs to be hand tightened firmly. So that's all good to go. We can put that away now. And we need to make sure that the actual bladder itself is in good condition. This is, of course, the vital part of the life jacket is the bladder, so we need to make sure there's no wear and tear on the bladder itself. So we need to check all the seams. We want to check front and back to make sure there's no mold and mildew on it. If you get too much mold and mildew, it will eat away at the bladder. So we want to make sure it's nice and clean. Check that off. So once everything has been checked over and is okay, then we can fill out the service form on the bladder itself using a ballpoint pen. That's going to let us know when we serviced it. It'll also let the authorities know when the jacket was last serviced so that we know when to next service the jacket. So then with the checklist, I'm going to sign off on it, put the date, write down the next inspection, which for this jacket will be in 12 months' time. So you can keep hold of this checklist, and that way you've got a record of your service history. And now we need to pack the jacket away, ready for use. For this jacket, we're just going to fold the bladder into the valise. Make sure that the ripcord is accessible at the bottom. Fasten the sides together. We're going to do this side. The tops can be a little bit tricky. So you want to try and follow the folds that are already on the bladder. You want to try and avoid having too many folds in one place. Pack that away. And now that jacket is rearmed and ready to use again.